Health Minister Christian Dubé is continuing with his revamp of the healthcare system. One idea the government is considering requiring new doctors to remain in the public sector after they finish their studies. Premier François Legault is ready to use the notwithstanding clause to make sure graduating doctors also stay in Quebec. Here he is in French.
Si c'est nécessaire, on est prêt à utiliser la clause dérogatoire. C'est trop important. Il nous manque de médecins. Il manque de médecins partout dans le monde. Bien, les médecins qu'on forme aux frais des contribuables au Québec doivent pratiquer au Québec.
Our next guest has a lot of questions about this and a lot of thoughts too. Frédéric Bérard is a constitutional lawyer and professor at l'Université de Montréal. Good morning.
Good morning.
Remind us how the notwithstanding clause works when it's applied.
Well, when it applies is a good part of the question you asked, because in terms of the Canadian Charter, the notwithstanding clause applies to Section 2 and to Section 7 to 15, which means that are excluded all the sections about the language rights, about the democratic rights, and about the liberty of circulation, which is provided by Section 6. When we talk about the fact that we want to prevent the future doctors to leave Quebec, this is an infringement of Section 6. And since it's a violation of Section 6, you cannot invoke the notwithstanding clause. So I don't know where the Premier Legault is going with this one, but frankly, you just need to take a look to the Charter, and it's written black on white.
So what do you think happens based on that, based on what you just said?
Well, my guess on that is that the Gouvernement Legault is trying to make some political gain, but because it has no application in terms of law. I mean, anyone who could take a look to the Canadian Charter will see at Section 33 it is written that the notwithstanding clause applies to Section 2 and to Section 7 to 15, which means that it does not apply to Section 6. And in that case, we're talking about liberty of circulation. So my point is, it's probably like, it's probably a show like we see that very frequently, where the rule of law is violated for political gains, because he probably wants to say to people, you know what, I'm going to be the tough guy. I'm going to invoke the notwithstanding clause if necessary. But the thing is that he just can't do that in that particular case.
I'm wondering from you, what do you make of how often the notwithstanding clause has come up in the last few years? Not just here in Quebec, but it's been a conversation that's been happening quite a bit lately.
Well, actually, it is it is a real dangerous tendency. You see that it just happened in New Brunswick, in Saskatchewan. The Legault government used it for Bill 21, used it for Bill 96. Now he wants to invoke it for the doctors. Yes, there is a real tendency. There's a real trend. This is a dangerous one because, I mean, each and every time that the politicians see as some kind of a inheritance, or the politicians are upset about this or that issue, now they're invoking that notwithstanding clause. Don't forget that the Ford government in Ontario did precisely the same 2 years ago to suspend the right to association for 55,000 people, employees in education in Ontario. So, which means that we are seeing a tendency that did not exist at the time. And frankly, I hope that the Supreme Court of Canada at one point will stop the tendency itself, because this is a dangerous one. If you want to live in a democracy that is based on the rule of law, those politicians have to respect the fundamental rights of the citizen, even though they don't agree with those rights each and every time, which is normal.
We're still waiting for all the details about what the Legault government and specifically Health Minister Christian Dubé will propose. But do you see any circumstance where they might be able to invoke the notwithstanding clause?
Well, actually, if my lecture is correct, if you're trying to violate the liberty of circulation, there is no way that you could use that notwithstanding clause. I'm pretty clear on that. So for me, it's all a very bad show. Let's say it that way. And hopefully it's going to end at one point, because otherwise we won't be living in the rule of law. And if we don't live under the rule of law, you don't live in a real democracy.
About the idea overall, we spoke with a young doctor earlier this week. She did not agree with this approach. How do you think young doctors, especially those in schools, should react to this plan or this possibility? Again, knowing that we don't have all the details yet.
Yeah, well, we have to wait for the details. As you say, this is a pretty good comment. Let's see if it's going to be a bill. Let's see if it's going to be a bylaw. Let's see if it's going to be anything at all. As I said, I think it's just a sort of ultimatum and based on political show more than anything else. But if there is a bill on it, then you can challenge the bill itself in the Superior Court of Quebec, saying that it violates Section 6, it violates the liberty of circulation, and the notwithstanding clause cannot apply to that particular case. And then the court would probably agree with that analysis and just strike down the law itself.
Mm-hmm. For someone who might feel that the notwithstanding clause is a remote issue that does not impact them, what would you say?
About what, sorry?
For someone who might feel that the notwithstanding clause is a remote issue, it's an issue that does not impact them, what would you say?
Well, that's the problem with the notwithstanding clause right now, is that, everyone is like, well, it permits a way to violate rights that is too easily. And we need to remember that, the fundamental rights, you don't need to agree with each and every one of them, obviously. You don't need to be like comfortable with each and every revendication, which with any kind of grievance from any kind of minority. But the thing is that if we decided in Canada and in Quebec, because we have precisely the same, in the Quebec Charter of Rights, right? We don't need to agree with everyone, and we don't need to agree with everything, but we need to agree on the basic. And the basic is that these are fundamental rights that are protected by both charters, that are protected by international law as well. So we need to respect that. And if it's too easy for politicians to violate, to suspend the fundamental rights, then, as I said, we won't be living in the rule of law. If you don't live under the rule of law, you don't live in a real democracy. Because if I ask you, Sean, is there any democracy around the world that is not based on the rule of law? I don't think you'll be able to find one. So all that to say that invoking the notwithstanding clause is now, in my opinion, too easy, and we need as citizens to protest against that new tendency that is dangerous for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll continue to follow this. We'll see what the health minister and the government proposes. In the meantime, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks to you.
This is Frédéric Bérard, constitutional lawyer and a law professor at Université de Montréal. We did send out an interview request for Health Minister Christian Dubé. We did not hear back. With a leadership race brewing and a general election